I grew up in a family where it was trash airport novels, like, and my parents would trade back and forth, and so like I grew up reading, and not all of this is bad, but I mean I definitely grew up reading like Heinlein and Robert Ludlum and stuff like that, like from a very, very early age. So when like the Bourne movies came out, I was like, that's not Robert Ludlum. I was like, I knew at like 16 years old or whatever. I was like, that's not right. But I've always kind of I've had a fascination with reading for sure, but as of late, it's been like pretty highbrow, more philosophy, and so I'm going back and forth, and I started reading Marcus Aurelius, and that led to like Epictetus, and that led to Seneca, and then someone talked to me about Alan Watts. I was like, never read him, so I'm going to check it out, and so I started reading Alan Watts, and then Alan Watts has now led to Aldous Huxley, because apparently those guys used to fucking trip together. So
what kind of philosophy are you reading?
It's really cool. I'm doing East meets West. So it's like Seneca and the Stoics and the Cynics from like Greek philosophy. And these are Roman people. It's interesting because there's these Roman dudes that are looking back to Greece going, they had it all figured out. And then
there was a whole cultural movement in Rome.
Yeah, which is interesting because like Marcus and Seneca and all these cats wrote their, I mean, the Stoic, like Marcus never meant for his shit to be read by anybody. He was just doing it to himself, and it's probably because Seneca died. He was a trainer or teacher of his, so he was continuing the conversation in notes. But they all wrote these in Greek, not Roman, because they figured they considered it more of a higher learning thing. And so it's really kind of cool. But the Alan Watts of it comes in because that dude's kind of responsible for like. That's why we have Richard Gere, because like he modernized and introduced Buddhism to the West and specifically America. So like Alan Watts, and he's kind of like the preeminent dude when it comes to Zen. But there was this place that they used to hang out in Beverly Hills. Actually, it's still there. It's this small, unassuming place that like Watts would hang out at, and Aldous Huxley and all these guys. So I mean, it's like. And Aldous Huxley died in like 1963. So I mean, he was pretty old when he was getting into this shit. But
I was going to say, I did not know they ever had any interactions, because I think of Aldous Huxley as significantly earlier than Alan Watts, but I'm not an expert on either. So it struck me as like
Huxley was really,
crossover.
From what I understand, Huxley was coming up in like the 40s and 50s, but he was kind of like on the outs as Alan Watts was like starting to tune in, because like Watts wrote The Way of Zen in the 60s. So
have you played or checked out, any of you, the game Everything?
No. What is this?
Yes, yeah.
Of course you have, Mike.
It's narrated. They actually used audio clips, right?
What? Exactly. The game has Alan Watts' speeches interspersed throughout, like his actual voice speaking.
I love that idea.
Those dudes did drugs making that game. What is called Everything?
Yeah, the idea of the game is it's like this exploration through the universe at every scale. So you can explore.
Yeah. I absolutely.
I was going to say the fact that Alanah said no is like
Yeah.
that's like the equivalent of Austin not knowing who the composer was, Mike not having the book behind him, and Alanah going, "I've never played that game before."
I mean, in Alana's defense, she does play all the games. So
all of the games.
Although I love that the idea that this one would, because it's like it doesn't have that much competition. It's like if I asked you, did you play that one shooter? I could see there being, maybe, I don't know, but it's like, did you play the one Alan Watts sort of Zen game?
Well, the Alan Watts didn't
shit.
didn't trigger my brain, but it was PS4 maybe.
I'm just now looking this up. I don't want to automatically assume that, but knowing the publisher and the studio that did this, I'm gonna pretty much assume that these guys were doing some drugs when they made this game.
I do wonder about that a lot of the time. I have a running theory that much less philosophical thing to say, that the writers of SpongeBob were just always high. Otherwise, I don't know how that show gets made.
Oh, dude, for real. I think that's a pretty
much less cool, but
high on ideas.
But SpongeBob on drugs.
Are you familiar
you don't come up
with
those characters?
Are you familiar with Sound Self?
No.
By Robin Arnott.
Now Robin was definitely high.
Yeah, exactly.
There's no ambiguity or.
Robin Arnott. What is it? What are you talking about? What's it called?
It's called Sound Self as one word. Not only
like
was Robin definitely on something, but the whole point of the game is to give the user a simulation of that, like specifically like psychedelics.
This just came out.
Yeah.
It did, yeah, but it's been in development. Like Robin's a friend,
right?
and I think I contributed to the Kickstarter like 6 years ago or something.
All right, so everything.
Child of Eden, more than any game I've ever played, made me think maybe I'll do drugs one day.
Yeah, here's what's so funny is I
love the dispassionate, like, I will consider that. I'll put it on the list of maybes.
Still haven't, but if I were
really?
to, I would play Child of Eden.
Okay, so but without incriminating anybody, like, so I was vehemently against anything. I smoked 2 packs a day at one time and would drink like a fish, but I drew the line at whatever, especially in Texas growing up, what was considered legal. So like pot, any of that, never did that. So it wasn't until I lived here for the longest time, and it was my 34th birthday, I think it was. Sounds about right. Travis Willingham came to me and was like, all right, dude, we're going to get you high. I was like, oh no. And
I love how this started without incriminating anybody, and then immediately
I'll incriminate myself.
Naming
Full
drugs.
Legal?
Absolutely.
Yeah, it was legal at the time. It was still the prescription thing. And so, I had my first like
Dr.
high
Travis,
experience.
in other
Dr.
words.
Travis
Dr.
Willingham.
Travis.
I'm
PhD.
prescribing you a bunch of brownies tonight. And so like that was, and I realized I was like, oh, okay, now I understand this. I was fearing the unknown, and I now understand what this is. And then I went to this like time period for a while where it's like it became my bourbon. It became like it's super uber pretentious, especially in LA, because you go to the dispensary and everyone's like, well, this right here is 40% this, and it's, you know, and they can trace back the lineage. It's like racehorses. It's weird. And so I took it. Yeah, integrity. I do with integrity.
Integrity Farms.
So I went a little too far over, and then I reined it back, and it's kind of like whatever now. But I've never done any psychedelic, and I've never that to me is kind of like, again, another hard line, where I don't think I would want to, even though it's expanding your consciousness. I just don't think that I would allow I have a real issue with, especially physically, being out of control. I never got to the point where I was like, I'm gonna get blackout drunk. Even getting high, I was just like, I want to be able to like just have a little bit of a buzz. I don't want to be like super trippy balls high. So I don't think I could ever do, like, obviously this book is talking about specifically mescaline and how that expanded Aldous Huxley and all these guys, their consciousness and stuff. And I was like, I'll read about it. So I want to see that at least academically I can understand it. And I would love to play a game that like focused on that and to somehow represent, in the same way, like the Case of the Curious Dog at Midnight or whatever was done as a, here's what it's like to be on the spectrum. It's completely told from the perspective of a kid who's autistic, and I was like, holy shit, I now understand, like my nephew. I understand so much more about the world as he experiences it. So maybe that's the same thing. I don't know. Super weird way to start our podcast, but there you go.
Welcome to Play
Getting
Watch
high
Listen,
with
everyone.
Troy.
There it is. Psychedelic edition. Oh my God.
I'm Alanah. I am
filters on.
joined by composer Austin Wintory, video game actor Troy Baker, and video game director Mike Bithell. I feel like starting off with talking about drugs is I can segue into our topic here somehow. Drugs apparently sometimes really take things to the next level. Just like next-gen gaming. All right, nailed it.
Hey!
Wow.
I do want to say before
even-
this goes up, there is a Ghost of Tsushima presentation that's going to go up today at some point in time, so we will not have seen
It's
that.
like, yeah, it's like 2
I am
hours.
dying to see more of that game.
I'm
I
very
am too,
excited.
man. I'm super
Because I don't
proud of
feel
that
I've got a
studio.
handle on what it is yet. I want to see. I've
do you
seen
mean?
really. It looks beautiful, but I've not got a map in my head of the design yet. You know that thing
It's
where you
like,
see
it's
games
like
and you're like,
the
I like
initial-
the aesthetic, but I don't know what it is yet. Like I don't know what the
initial teasers
menus
of,
are and the game is. And,
It definitely feels like something I need to play to understand.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but not like on a Death Stranding level. Like
That's what I was gonna say.
True.
It reminds me of the initial
That's
teasers
true.
there, where I was going, I don't have any clue what this game will actually be.
Well, I think most
There's-
of what we've seen in Ghost of Tsushima has been gameplay, whereas Death Stranding, it was largely cinematic.
Oh yeah. Oh, there's
just
no
that-
like, there's none. Yeah, there's no accusation on my part of like it.
No.
They've not shown gameplay.
it's think
I've
the
not got my
gameplay's
head around it.
Very cinematic, so therefore you're like, how does this play? Like, what is?
Yeah,
this
where do I
feel
step
like?
in? What button do I
think
press?
You can,
How does
you
this
can
work?
change
Yeah.
stances and whatever. This is going to age really badly. Hopefully, we'll know in like 2 hours.
The audience knows
Yeah.
more than we do right now. Yeah.
I think that just by and large, like that studio, look at what Sucker Punch has done, and they did one thing really, really well, and the one thing that I can really commend them for is from the top down, from Brian on down. Those guys are not a studio to rest on their laurels, and they like really, really push themselves and to go, we have a hit franchise. Fuck it, let's shake it up. And they reboot their own franchise. And then they go, all right, there's a good franchise. We don't want to do that anymore because we've been working on the same thing for the last 10 years. How can we really stretch the studio? And iterate on their ideas like a lot, y'all. Like they went through demo after demo after demo to land on this. And I really, really commend those guys. Billy Harper especially is just an amazing talent. I can't say enough nice stuff about that guy. That guy he did almost all the move sets for Delson himself on a trampoline and a move-on suit. And he's fucking awesome.
I loved Infamous. I loved the Second Son and what was the DLC called?
Oh, dude, First Light. Laura Bailey.
First Light.
Both
amazing. Yeah.
Laura Bailey's just like, it frustrates me how just completely effortlessly good she is and just drops into any role that she is. She can play a badass in Gears. She can play punk in First Light or Second Son.
Can she play a lead in a musical? That's the question.
That's the real question. That's the real question.
Is that the measure? Is it?
Yeah, dude. I will say this. Laura's got an incredible voice, and she is very timid and very reserved about it. And she finally was really super brave and put a thing up on Instagram of just her singing this Sarah Bareilles song on a piano that I bought her for her birthday. And she crushed it. I was like, and it just exploded, and people just showered her with love. And I think it gave her a lot of confidence. So when we cast her in chorus, I was like, she did so very, very trepidatiously because she's like, holy shit. Now, again, kind of like Sucker Punch, it's like, I'm not going to rest on my laurels. I'm actually going to step out and be brave and do something that really makes me tremble. And she's crushing it. Like, she came in and she sings from the same place she acts from. It's just incredibly
It was cool watching the two of you work when we were doing the prototype because Troy, for those unaware, Troy was directing. And so much of it was basically just about giving her the freedom to not be timid, essentially. Just like creating that space of like, you got this. You don't actually need me. I'm not a vocal coach in this instance. I'm not even directing in the traditional sense. I mean, I know I'm kind of putting words in your mouth, but that's what it really looked like from my POV, because it was like she would sing the song or sing that fragment, technically accurately. And then you'd be like, okay, cool. So now, like, perform it, essentially. Mm-hmm. Obviously, you said it more effectively than that. But then it was like the next take. I remember you turning to me and it was like, holy shit. That just exploded to the next level. And all it took was just that, like, letting go of that last lingering kind of self-doubt, you know?
Can I just real quick get one of you to explain what chorus is for people who
yes. Don't know? Austin, go for it. You'll tee it up
Chorus
great.
is a video game musical currently in progress, possibly in a curious situation regarding its name. But
I didn't know if you were going to go there, but man,
I mean, it's just an unknown.
It's like, no.
It's an unknown at this point.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
And I mean, it's an unknown, if only for me. What the outcome will be there, if someone's going to have to change names, if it won't matter. I don't know. Because I don't know what's legal. I don't know what's best practice. Because I know in music, for example, you can't copyright a title. That's why there's 1,000 songs called, The Sunset or whatever. Like titles are not copyrightable in music. But in games, I think it might be different, and I don't know.
Well, trademarks in particular would be different, yeah.
Either way,
bottom line, it's a game that we're developing with Summerfall Studios that was originally part of a GoFig campaign that got funded super super fast, and it's a completely interactive musical. And Laura is our lead. And the thing about Laura, I love that this has become a Laura Bailey episode.
She is fantastic.
Next gen.
She is fantastic.
She's next
For anyone
gen.
who hasn't,
In her defense, she's
she will be
phenomenally
probably.
good.
Anyone who hasn't played Gears 5, honestly, that performance is just insane. Insane. It's so good. Like,
she was a huge. This is what gives her the edge, is that Laura's a gamer, and she goes into that with an incredible knowledge of the franchise that she's playing, or in the franchise that she is going to play, right? So she went into Gears going, I know exactly what this is, in the same way Alanah that you did as well. I feel like
The true star of Gears 5.
yeah, Laura
fine.
Bailey. Laura comes from she's a Swiss Army knife, because she comes from a theater background, so she has that inherent respect for the text, inherent respect for the director and all of the people that have gone into the page that she's being presented with. So she honors the page in every aspect, not just the words, but everything that comes to that. And her thing is being able to move within those confines. What's fun about her is the first big directing job that I had was on Shadow of War, and she was cast as Eltariel, even though she had played previously in the first game, my wife. They just kind of hand waved. They're like, yeah, it's the same person. It doesn't matter. It's kind of like what David Milch did on Deadwood. So she comes in, and I was like, I'm super nervous. I feel super apprehensive about, sometimes it's weird, like working with friends and directing friends specifically. But I thought, okay, Laura's going to be here. It's going to be easy peasy. And she ended up being one of the most challenging ones. And there was one scene in particular that we had where both of us were frustrated. And I pulled her off to the side. I was like, dude, what the fuck? What is going on? It's like, you're like, get off my dick. Like, what is wrong with you? And she was like, don't ask me how I feel. That's my business. I want you as the director to tell me where I need to start and where I need to end, and trust me enough to know that I'll be able to get there, and let me figure that out. And she was absolutely right, because I was trying to direct her in one narrow way. Walk up to an actor and ask them how they're feeling. What are they thinking? If that's not what they want to do, they're like, yo, that's my secret, and I'm gonna let you know that through my process, and I'm gonna let you know that through my performance. I'm not just gonna tell you that, because now it's cheap, now it's out there, now we all know what I'm doing. There's no subtext. I was like, get yours, girl. And she crushed it, and that's when the scene turned, and it became, like, that's what it was. I was actually the one as the director that was holding that scene back, and she was the one that allowed me to send it to new heights. So she is, and she's also been a director. So she has worked on both sides of the glass. And a lot of times, exactly what you're saying, Austin, she just needs to be reminded, it's like, yo, you have fun to play with this and truly make this your own. And she just needs to be given permission sometimes. But yeah, so she's awesome. There you go, Laura Bailey. There's your exhaustive plug.
if anyone ever contested that, I would question who they are as a person. They're like, Laura Bailey, not that good. I'd be like,
yeah,
what?
just kind of garden variety. And like,
Overrated.
Who are you?
She won't tell you what she's
Variety is
feeling. She won't tell you what
particularly
she's
good.
feeling. I don't.
garden
I
variety.
did always wonder, though, related to Mordor, how that Nemesis system just didn't end up in every game. I thought it was so fantastic, and it could have been in Mad Max. It's WB, and it would have worked really well for Mad Max. And I expected when that came out for everyone to try to copy it, and when it didn't end up in every video game, I was like, why?
Mad Max was in development before Shadow of War.
Yeah.
So, and that was Avalanche.
It came out after.
Came out after, but it was in development before. Well, so Shadow of Mordor went through like multiple iterations. The team changed, the whole story changed, my character changed. I was originally, I can't remember the original name of the character. It was bad.
You were a hobbit
Batman.
in the,
The
first
original name of the
draft.
character was Batman.
And so that was a really, really rough time, I think, for games. I feel like I'm dominating, but it was a really rough time for games because everyone was like, are we going to be a launch title or are we not? Are we going to be legacy? Are we going to be... And so everyone was kind of doing this weird dance. And then Shadow of Mordor ended up going from being a legacy title to kind of a launch title. and it was the first game that was really capable of like look under the hood and see what this thing can do. But I don't know. I feel like a lot of people were like, "Yo, we're not going to do a cover of that song. Like you guys did that really, really well, and we're not going to just blatantly steal that tech. First of all, it's their tech, right? It's built based upon their engine. But they're not just going to.
Probably very difficult to implement. Like that was a thing where when that game came out, I was like, give it maybe 3 years, and everyone will have their own Nemesis system because I feel like that wasn't easy to make. It's very complicated.
No,
but
I think conceptually
it didn't.
though, I think there's been some aspects of that, right? Mike, don't you think that there's been some aspects of a Nemesis system and emergent gameplay that's coming out of it?
Well, I remember at the time I actually wrote, like, I can't remember where it ended up. I think it was on Polygon or something. Like, I wrote a breakdown of the Nemesis system because it's actually technically like super easy. Like the Nemesis system is technically very easy to do. The genius of it is coming up with the idea and the design and making a project around it. The actual
Carlos
technology,
Santana solo. It's super easy, or a Picasso painting. You look at that and go, I could have done that, but you didn't. He did it first.
Exactly. And so I was in the Alanah camp. I was basically saying, like, now that we all have this idea out in the open, this would theoretically come up. But I think Troy's 100% right. I think it informed a lot of designers, but obviously no one wanted to be the people who just copied it. So I think there's a lot of stuff. You look at like the way Ubisoft's open world structure shifted. I think there's a lot of stuff that took from that. In terms of the Assassin's Creed games have definitely stolen some stuff from the Nemesis system. The Far Cry games in terms of how those outposts work. There's kind of some nice tangential things. I think
I was going to say
I think that's shifted.
Odyssey literally
I think has a Nemesis.
Kind of like the Nemesis system with these bounty hunters.
That's right.
Are they not in Origins
right.
as well? I don't remember. I'm like, I think they might be.
But I think that's what they did. I think a lot of people very kind of skillfully took those design lessons, which was basically that you can have emergent...
So you would say that system was not difficult to program?
Oh, the first time, I'm sure it cost millions of dollars and lots of time because the problem is when you're making something, it's that classic thing of like, why do people clone games? People think that the making of the game is the hard bit. The making of the game, if you know the game you're making, it doesn't take very long to make a game
Well, look at Thomas Was Alone is the quintessential example, right? Like,
right, that game took 3 years, but if I made it tomorrow,
but didn't you say like the prototype was like 3 days though? That was like
sure.
Isn't
and
that
that's the thing is, I think
jam?
it's not a technical challenge. So a good example of this is I've been playing around with like a little and a future project or like a micro game.
I saw your tweet. I want to know what that is.
Like,
I will once we've all switched our mics off. I will absolutely tell you.
Kick-ass.
But it's but because that's actually set based on something, so there's a lot of rules kind of already established. The prototype of that took like a couple of days to make because the thinking is the hard bit, and then of course art production and all of that stuff and code. Obviously, like I'm not saying games are easy to make, but like I think people overestimate how hard. It's much easier to make the second game that's a clone. That's why mobile game makers will spend like 2 years making 3s, and then any coder that's half decent can make a clone of 3s in a weekend. That doesn't mean that those guys who made the first one were slow. It just means they were figuring it out. They were making a million wrong choices and coming back to it and working out. So yeah, with something like the Nemesis system, yes, for a AAA studio making an open world game, it would be very financially achievable to add that into their game. If they had it from the conceptual phase. That's the other thing is as well, like if you think about how long a big AAA game is in development for, they would have to decide on this right at the start, because one thing with the Nemesis system is it's a hierarchical structural thing where if you couldn't add it into a game you'd already made, you'd have to have it there from day one.
It is very much that game's core, really.
Yeah,
that's what that
or you have to tear down the game you're making, which is from what Troy's saying, sounds like that's kind of what they did. They kind of had to dig it out and build it back up again. So yeah, I think it's had that kind of passive influence. I don't think anyone wants to be the one to clone the Nemesis system though. It's not a glamorous thing to be pitching.
People cloned, I'd be happy about it. Nemesis system is one of them. Like, I think it's so good. I feel that way about the Arkham combat system. You can put that in anything and I'll love it. Like Sleeping Dogs, I was like, yes, more of this. It's such. And
that's a really good example of a mechanic, because that's a mechanic that's very surface level, or kind of it's an interaction combat mechanic. That's not easy. That takes a while, but you could theoretically like change course on a project you were a third of the way into. You could go, when Batman came out, you could be like, okay, that was good. We're gonna
But
kind
who
of
did
tweak
that
our
first?
thing.
Who did that first? Was it Assassin's Creed or was it Arkham?
I feel like it was Arkham, yeah.
I think it was Arkham. I think the first Assassin's Creed, their melee system was not that. Was it? Or maybe it was.
It was.
I feel like Assassin's
Feels
Creed
like a
2
long
was
time
definitely
ago.
that.
But that was, so I mean, Assassin's Creed came out 2007.
Yeah.
I'm going to have to look that up.
So
Wasn't it the great year? Wasn't it 2006?
It
No,
wa- I mean-
it was 7. It was the one where all the games came out.
everything came out, right?
Very good.
Oh, the magic bookshelf strikes again.
Let me,
God damn you, Mike
Audio
Bithell, I love
listeners,
you.
Always
he
go
has
to the
pulled out a
source.
book
Always
that
go
is
to the source.
relevant again.
I'm going to go back, like, when I'm just going to find out
Actually,
when they
what would
started
be amazing
development.
if the book was called "Who Did It First: The Combat of the Arkham games versus Assassin's
But it's
Creed."
just 2 pages.
A
But
book by Mike
someone
Bithell.
bought it. Yeah, I feel like it was Arkham, but there are plenty of games that have iterated on that too. But I find that system so satisfying. I mean, Mad Max is also an
cross-reference.
example of a game that did that. Very nice. Assassin's Creed. Good
That's a
stuff.
cool
Jesus.
cover for that.
That is cool.
I've never
It's
That's
seen
really
animated.
nice, isn't it? Isn't that
Yeah.
nice? It's like the encyclopedia thing.
Cool.
Anyway, sorry.
Yes.
stop showing
But I
off.
did
There's
want to
a,
ask you guys. Oh, go ahead, Austin.
Well, we'll keep this to one sentence. It's just there's a musical equivalent to what you're describing that I remember thinking about. It was about 20 years ago now, but when The Matrix came out, the score was so distinctive and so unlike other scores, and it was this incredible blend of like very kind of slick modern electronic synth sound design with very, very kind of postmodern, almost classical, like late 20th century modern classical orchestral music in a way that to my ear is still kind of unsurpassed as a musical hybrid of electronics with traditional orchestra. And I remember thinking, this is so distinct that I bet it's going to have a legion of imitators, but it's so perfectly ingrained with the identity of the Matrix that you would have to be the person to say, like, I know I'm making, a Transformer movie or a Marvel movie or whatever. I have to, like, I know this has nothing to do with anything like the Matrix, but I'm just going to go ahead and just grab this. And I think, and to this day, no one's ever made a score that sounds like their primary reference or inspiration was the Matrix. It stands alone, and that's so rare.
Well, no
but
movie we
it's-
remember anyway, right? That's the thing. Is like I think being derivative
Well,
often is
fair.
a way of kind of knocking yourself off the history books.
Yeah, no, that's true. I should say no kind of successful or otherwise kind of noteworthy or acclaimed or whatever kind of. But it's the same. I kept thinking that same thing. Like, who wants to be the person that has just like swap out the assets, but plug in their nemesis? I think Odyssey probably did it as well as you could, and not feel like you're shamelessly stealing from it. But anyway,
It would be cool
because it's so
and
rare.
I think there's there's a little part of me that's like, I just said on a podcast that we're going to like put out there that it's easy to do the Nemesis system, and now I kind of want to like test that theory by trying to do it
I
in
understand what
something.
you meant in principle. I'm sure.
Yeah, like I
Someone
want
can
to
just
be
pick it up and make it, but
someone. Yeah, but it's like I'm now going to actually have to go and like try and put that in something at some point.
It's
'Cause
easy
I'm
in the way that-
academically interested in how you could kind of try.
Yeah.
I wonder if you could do something similar to that at kind of an indie scale. Because a lot of and even then, just the way they did it was so clever.
I think
in
Mike
terms of how
Bithell
they
just
did,
announced his next game.
Oh, shit.
But how they
Please
no,
make a
someone
Matrix
else
game.
making it though.
Make a Matrix game.
That's
Please
an
make a
interesting
Matrix
thing
game.
Matrix
about-
game with the Matrix music. Well, no, I will steadfastly not use the Matrix music.
Isn't
I
there
will
already-
hire
Yeah, just-
Austin and say, "Don't you dare! I don't want the music in this to sound the thing like the Matrix."
I would
mean, we-
actually like for someone to do, because
We've got the character half there already, just from the last
Easy.
thing, so we're fine.
Easy.
This is tangents, but the first Equilibrium came out and then Matrix crushed
Oh my
it.
god!
Hey,
Did Equilibrium come out first
First.
of the two? Really?
Yeah,
That's the one with the gun Carter
fucking
thing, right?
genius, dude. Oh, so good.
Is that what guns look like to you, you weird Commonwealth man?
Have you seen the movie? Because that's how
I
they
haven't,
shoot.
to be fair, I
back
have
me
not.
up, Troy. Please back me up. That's what they're
And-
doing in the movie, right?
And in their defense, what was the shorthand comment that they called it?
Gun Carter, right?
Gung Kata. So similar
Yeah.
to Gung Fu, which would be in John Wick. I feel like I'm doing like a little Austin, little oddly enough, you can trace it back to, and the composer for that movie was
Alanah.
as Mike reaches behind him in the bookshelf.
Equilibrium. History
Alanah,
of Kung Fu.
When we're done, Alanah, I need you to watch the trailer of Equilibrium and then send me an apology because
I
that
don't
was a
think I've
perfect
even
mime
heard
of the
of it,
movie
so-
Equilibrium.
Oh shit! Who was it? It wasn't Tay Diggs. It was Christian Bale and
It was Bale. Yeah.
Bale and who? But who was his? It's basically Brave New World. Speaking of Aldous Huxley, it's Brave New World
Yeah.
with guns.
Oh, it's not a good film. You're right. Who was the second lead in that?
It's so
gonna look
bad.
it up.
And you could tell they thought they were making a badass movie, and just the director and the DP. It was a wrong camera package, wrong lenses, wrong way
Did
to
you
shoot
say
it.
that you thought that came out before The Matrix?
It did.
It was 3 years after.
No.
Well, unless IMDb is full of lies.
It was Diggs. You're right.
99.
It was Diggs.
99 versus 2002.
Oh my god! I don't think that's
By the way,
right.
there's no way in hell I'm not watching that movie tonight. No.
Oh yeah, dude, get
man.
Now
high.
you've reminded me of its existence, man. I need to.
Okay, so I wanted to jump back to Austin, what you were saying about people, being terrified to even
Bring
come
us back
close
on
to
track.
replicating the
Yeah.
Matrix. This is a thing that, interestingly enough, a lot of indie studios, I think, don't recognize the importance of PR people or marketing. So they often think, I can do that myself. That's just drafting up an email and sending it to press. I can find a press list. What does that matter? They just completely underestimate how important that stuff is for getting your game out there. And unless it's something that, I've spoken about this before, is extremely shareable and can be bite-sized and that's shared with everyone like Fez, or like a Dream Daddy, it's very difficult to get an indie game to have traction. And one of the things that you see studios do who definitely don't have PR managers is go, this game is Dark Souls combined with whatever, or like Zelda combined with whatever. They don't market their games for what they individually do. They always just say, we ripped this from this franchise and this from this franchise, and that's what we're putting in the headline. And because so many of them do it, it's really ineffective. But I figure that the reason that they have to do that is it's cheaper to make a game in theory, if you are, to Mike's point, if a lot of the made up cost of games is coming up with a solid idea and then actually putting it in motion rather than spending time figuring
Yeah, it's
out
less
what
the
game
idea than the
is.
design that comes of the idea, right? The kind of, how do we actually make this kind of thing? Yeah, but you're absolutely
Yeah.
right. Yeah, it saves some time.
Yeah, so and I also interviewed devs at PAX who'll be like, well, we wanted to make our first game after university, so we just picked 2 games we like and combined them. And sometimes it comes up with really, really cool stuff, but I feel like that is a definitely a thing that indies are more willing to do. I'm forgetting the name of the game. There was like one really dope game that was literally just Dark Souls combined with Zelda, and I was like, cool, that's what you did, that's what you said in all of your interviews, that's what you intended to do, and you made this awesome indie thing. Because sometimes taking risks for an indie studio is a lot scarier, but then we're at a point with AAA as well where a studio like Ubisoft is iterating off themselves so much that, have you guys seen the review of Ubisoft game?
No, I've
I
not.
don't remember whose website it's on, but it's just a review of Ubisoft game. Let me find it. It's very good.
That sounds
like,
hilarious.
No title, just Ubisoft game.
Ubisoft
It's like,
game
presumably it's every
review.
Ubisoft game, right?
While
But to
you're
what
looking-
Alana's...
Sorry, Mike, go ahead.
That's cool. I was just saying to what Alanah was saying though. It's just about managing risk. Like you're on as an indie, you can't be risky on all levels. So sometimes you just have to choose. Like, here's the 2 things I'm going to be risky about. In like
Sure.
John
But don't you
John
think
Wick's
the
case,
risk
it's like
threshold
hold
is
on.
actually lower or higher for indies than for AAA because there's theoretically less at stake in terms of overall budget or size of team or whatever. Like Canton.
Oh, you said, sorry,
Indie-
you're saying indie's less risky or AAA's less risky?
No, I'm saying there's powerful incentive for AAA's to be less risky.
Oh, yeah, for
compared
sure.
to indies.
Yeah, for sure.
What the hell is this, Alanah Pearce? First
By
of
now,
all,
we've all heard of Ubisoft game, and if you haven't, you've been living under a rock. It's basically just Ubisoft's
Oh, it's point
game
and
is a story
clickbait,
of a
yeah.
main character, a gruff or sassy white man who's really good at parkour, killing while doing parkour. It's basically like a
Jesus.
review it's on point and clickbait that I've always really loved, that just combines all Ubisoft games. The message of the main story seems kind of lost, unfortunately, which is a shame because Ubisoft have clearly put so much money and effort into polishing Ubisoft game. It feels like they were afraid to make a statement in the main story.
I want to point out, by the way, here's another article from this site. This site feels like an offshoot of The Onion.
They're so good, though. Yeah. If you've not, devote a couple of hours to digging into this at some point, try, because it is hilarious.
Here's just two others that you can see here. Animal Crossing, an oral history of the 2020 Bunny Day Massacre. And then Opinion, female gamers simply don't have the reflexes to be called a bitch, slut, whore at a professional level.
Very good.
What I love is this Ubisoft game review is 6 years old, and everything is like
still holds
has
up.
aged well. Yeah.
What was their Metacritic though? I want to see what they actually scored it. What did they give it?
I don't know if they gave it a score, but the final line is Ubisoft also makes some absolutely incredible smaller games like Rayman Legends, Child of Light and Valiant Hearts, The Great War, but nobody plays those, so whatever.
Rayman Legends, everybody played that game.
Have I talked on this show before about the thing that I love about Ubisoft? Well, that I find fascinating about Ubisoft. Maybe love's too strong a word. They have a department that's job is to predict future trends. Have you heard about this? And it explains every Ubisoft game once you know it. So Ubisoft, I saw a talk actually by the woman who heads it up, and basically they have a department internally where they're basically tracking what they think is going to be the hot button issue, the discussion about 5 years into the future. So what they do then is they try and make their game about, or at least have the aesthetics of,
they were
the
just
thing that's going to be.
slightly too early with The Division. Just a little.
Well, that's the thing, is once you realize this, you go back and you look at all of their Ubisoft AAA games, and they basically have successfully predicted most major cultural shifts that have occurred in the last
Skull and Bones,
6 years.
Naturally. Pirates have made a big comeback recently.
No, but seriously though, did that game come out?
No.
Okay. But no, seriously though, if you look at where the Watch Dogs Brexit game that is coming out at some point, if you look at Far Cry 5 with its white supremacist stuff, they were predicting the kind of discussions that would be happening, and that's for a AAA studio. They have to know. They have to if they want to be on the ball
3
with
years
this
ahead
stuff,
or 2 years ahead.
they have to be so far ahead, and genuinely that's amazing to me. So I genuinely Ubisoft announcements to me are now like Nostradamus. If I see them announce a game coming out in a year or two,
there's the title of the podcast.
That's it. Ubisoft and Nostradamus.
I lost. I was going to do psychedelics and stuff, but Mike Bithell just slam dunked the whole thing. It's like, here's what it is, guys. Ubisoft is Nostradamus.
We're all actually in Animus is the real twist there.
All I'm saying,
I have
2021 Vikings are coming back. That's all I'm saying. That's the
First of all, Vikings. I was onto that shit. I fell off the whole Game of Thrones.
Are you about to be a Viking
not
hipster
a rant
at this point?
I expected.
That's amazing.
Oh my God.
Yeah,
he's
know.
very impassioned leading into this Viking rant.
I was an early adopter of Vikings before. I was into Vikings before it was cool. Hipster glasses on. Wait.
Oh, he's got them. He's got the glasses.
I feel like you need a wicker hat though to really bring this home.
Yeah. I was watching. I remember watching the first episode of Vikings. Was like, holy shit, dude! I'm totally into this because it's not at all what I thought it was going to be. Read an article with what's his nuts. John will blank on his name.
I'm not familiar with his nuts.
Blue-eyed dude. That's just.
Have his nuts ever composed music for a major movie?
Yes, awesome. You should. Or actually, there's a book about him. The guy that played
I'm ready. Well, let's go.
The whole.
It did cross my mind of, do I have any history books about Vikings up
Vikings,
there?
If
I
you
don't.
did,
Annoyingly,
Jesus,
I don't.
It's a magic book. You have every
earlier.
book. But I was super into that whole show, and then all of a sudden we saw everything starting to skew. And even when we were tying this back into Shadow of Mordor, there was when they were looking originally for other directors, they were like, what if we did this person did an episode of Vikings, because shows just change through directors, and keep one showrunner to kind of give it some cohesion. But I was super into that. And now all of a sudden everyone's like, oh, Vikings is such a great show. And I was like, dude, Game of Thrones is tame, man. I watched them pull some dude's lungs out from his back on an episode, season 3, Blood Eagle. Watch that shit. It's just such a great show.
If you want to see something really, really cool, go on YouTube. A friend of mine does the score for that show, and they did a performance of it at the Krakow Film Music Festival in Poland, where it's about 15,000 people in the audience, and the composer, he's conducting the orchestra, and Tina Guo is playing electric cello, and Einar Selvik, who is the vocalist from Wardruna, who's essentially a Viking, a modern Viking. But he also is, he's in the show, I think. I don't know. I've never watched it, so I don't know. But I'm pretty sure he's on screen as well. But he's involved in the music, and they give this performance where he's singing and playing, and Tina's playing, and then there's a whole big orchestra and choir. And it's like 6 minutes of just raw fury. It's absolutely amazing, and it's like, you know, one of those that you watch it and you're like, I like, all the comments are, you know, my beard just grew a beard, you know, and it's like, I get that. I feel that right now.
I think it was the final episode of season 4, or the next to last episode of season 4, that is one of the greatest episodes of television I've ever seen. And the last episode of whatever most recent one is, out season 5 or season 6, is one of the best directed episodes of television I've ever seen. There's like two amazing, like, I don't care if you like the show at all, just from a pure from a performance, cinematography, directorial standpoint, it is flawless. It is.
Is there like a guide? So I've never got around to watching it, but I want to. Do I start at season 1 and go through? Do I skip something? What do I do?
No, you need to watch all of it, because
the whole thing.
They'll tie back to shit from season 1. And season 1 is like, you can tell that history did not believe in this show. They were going to do it, but it was like, it feels like somebody made this show, which is kind of like Mr. Robot did. There were a couple of other, what was the first that really kicked this off? The one with Mads Mikkelsen. Hannibal. They shot the show completely. It was like, who wants it? And then they put it, and then like CBS or whoever bought it. So they did the same thing, I think, with Vikings, where they shot it in Canada, and they were like, who wants this show? And history's like, fuck it, we'll take it. But there was no money. And then it did great. And so every episode or every season, the production value just almost exponentially doubles or triples. It's crazy what it does.
Even Game of Thrones, you can see that happening though. Like season 1 compared to later on is very pretty small. Drastic. Yeah.
What is his name?
Design is nuts. Okay, to bring it back to next gen, which was intended to be the topic. You guys also
40 minutes
footage, right?
in.
Travis Fimmel.
Oh yeah,
Travis Fimmel.
Yeah, that Unreal demo was amazing.
Absolutely amazing.
Who said that wasn't a game? It was like, too bad it's not actually a game. Was that not actually a game that they were showing?
No, I mean, it's just a demo that they made.
Ugh, I want to play that game though.
Well, the one thing that got me about that demo is that
I mean, if you got 40 million, Austin, if you got 10 million, 20 million, we can pool our resources and build that game.
I'm going
to use all my John Wick Hex
residuals
advances and
are you seriously criticizing your payment on John Wick Hex on this public podcast?
I'm not criticizing, I'm celebrating.
Oh my God,
you've turned me into an investor, a studio investor, and I'm very grateful for that fact.
So
as long as you don't mind if I just give you a smaller amount up front.
Fair enough.
No, the thing that got me about it was that sorry, Austin.
No, I was gonna
even though it's to me it was clearly a demo, because people don't tend to make games where the environments are that incredibly detailed, and those artists at Epic put that much time into making those environments, and then you just speed past them and never look at any of them. I feel like that is not generally how resources are distributed with any AAA game, because especially if you know your players probably aren't going to be looking at the things that are around them because you're moving too fast through it.
You're flying through it like a wingsuit.
But that's what's wild about that demo is there's obviously an enormous amount of artwork involved and an enormous amount of like art effort, but a massive part of that is that a lot of those environmental pieces of art, those environmental bricks they built that environment from, were scanned. They were photographs essentially. So that's where it gets. I think the rock structures at least were photogrammetry, or at least were obviously used that. That would still, don't get me wrong, that's not. It's like mocap. Like there's still a lot of very skilled artists and technicians after the act. But it does speed through the process. So
yeah, I was going to say, isn't that kind of
we could see more of that next gen?
That was sort of the central selling point, I thought, wasn't it? That like you can create something of this fidelity without spending 10 million hours like you might have before to
building
get
it from
there.
The bottom up.
Well, it's the crazy thing is LOD is the lodding. Like which we
What
can
does that
get
mean?
into. So level of detail. So you've seen this when you're running around in GTA and you are far away from something, you notice it's like low poly, and then as you get closer, it fills in. Or when you're playing a game and the cutscene loads and the characters are all blobby messes for a few frames until they click into place. So it's how games render stuff, basically, is essentially for every object. So a car in GTA, there would be multiple levels of detail of that car. There'd be the model, the mesh that's shown to you when you're right up close. There'd be the version that they show to you maybe when you're 10 meters away, 50 meters away, 100 meters away, right up until it's like a cube, basically, when you're X miles away flying a helicopter overhead.
This is the same thing you were talking about last time with the whole guns in Call of Duty, right? Like the gun that I pick up is not the gun that's in there because there's different.
Yeah, and that's all games. So like Last of Us, right? The version of the character model that's you're playing in the cutscenes is going to be different to the version that I'm running around as a player, and is going to be different than the version you see from 100 miles away for a wide shot, because they want to put those polys into the environment. The big thing with the Unreal pitch, and the thing that I'm having arguments with tech people about right now, of kind of trying to figure it out, is they're claiming that they're going to make lodding essentially invisible as a process. Right now, if you want to make different LODs of a model, there are tools you can use that can kind of trim the time, but it's still a manual process where you're having to make all that. What they're claiming on the Unreal side is all of that would be automated. So you basically make a super high-res mesh like you would for a movie, and then the magic elves at Unreal turn that into all the different LODs that would be needed, and then that you can run through a level.
The engine itself would do that. That's interesting.
That's what they're claiming. So I mean, literally the team call today at Bithell Games was all the artists going, "This is amazing. We should play with this. This sounds really cool." And all the tech guys going, "I don't know if that's true. That sounds ridiculous.
Wow, it's too good to be true."
Well, what I said on the call, and I think it's true, is the great thing about game development is everything's ridiculous and impossible right up until the moment where it becomes completely standard.
And it could be and it works.
Yeah, and it could be one of those moments. And if it is one of those moments, then that's incredibly exciting. Just for the indie side, because of the amount of work it saves us. Yeah. Right now, realistically, I can't produce a game of a AAA fidelity, partially because of all of this work doing LODs. Like, I can't make environments that are massive because of the amount of technical challenges to doing that.
And you're saying this would change that for you?
Yeah, in theory.
So you're saying that theoretically, it's possible that like a AAA studio that is going to do something like Assassin's Creed, this like III studio, this like super indie studio,
it brings us all up. Yeah,
fuck.
In theory. Well, look, think of it this way, right? So video games, right? Let's think of a gun. the quintessential building block of all video games, a gun,
sure.
Right? A gun from Halo.
David
right?
Cage would like to join this conversation, by the way.
the assault rifle from Halo, right? Imagine that, just like a generic space gun. The way that we as a game studio would make that is obviously you do the concept art, you start modeling. You model the gun at like stupidly high resolution in a way that never could be used in a game, and that takes maybe probably for a AAA pipeline, that's going to be taking in the low number of weeks, 1 week, 2 weeks, depending on how much of a hero prop this is.
Okay.
Then you have to, right now in the current process, you have to turn that into something you can use in the game, which means you have to bake down a lot of detail into normal maps. You have to make different polygon counts of that model. You have to figure out how to render that model in real time. You have to make shadow maps, ambient occlusion maps. You have to do a bunch of technical stuff on top of that before it goes into the gun and looks cool. And all of that work is massively invisible to the player. By definition, it's designed to be invisible. We don't want you to spot that we've swapped out the gun for a crap gun because it's further away from you. Mm-hmm. That would defeat the entire purpose. But yeah, in theory, this is make the asset and you're done. And if that's true, that's incredible. That saves so much technical artistry in the middle. It sounds ridiculous, but everything does until it's real. So I don't know.
Does that make jobs then? Is there people that could potentially? Does that make them obsolete?
It makes a certain amount of it makes some skill sets obsolete if it's true. But then people would reskill that's the backbone of the games. I think I'm pretty sure I even said on this. My first job in the industry is a 0.03 millisecond button press in Unity now. That's how the industry moves. So you always have to be reskilling ultimately. And
With
people
this
sometimes get left behind, but generally, they'll just go into other jobs doing other cool stuff.
A lot of things that like Unreal seems to be like it's kind of like that's what the big boys use. And even though there's a lot of big games that are made on Unity, one of the things that's great about Unity is the accessibility that it has, especially to smaller studios. Does this kind of undermine what the place that Unity has in the marketplace for indie developers?
Until I've played with it, I don't know. Like it's a different pipeline.
I
mean, theoretically, it's a completely different way of doing art in video games. So until we've all, we'll probably grab it and start playing with it and see how it fits into what we do. But like, I think a lot of developers will do the same. But also on the indie side, we were talking about risk taking earlier. Knowing an engine is a big risk, right? So starting a new engine can introduce a bunch of problems. That's what all of the platform holders kind of what Unity and Unreal specifically rely on, is you're going to be loyal because it's easier. If you want to keep making games quickly, you use the thing your team already knows and has training in. That's why both Unreal and Unity, beyond obviously also being lovely people, provide so many of their tools to universities, because if you get people using that from the start of their careers, then that's the thing that they're going to keep using throughout their careers rather than having to reskill. So
to your point, Troy, I also was looking at Unreal's like on their site, and they announced as part of the tech demo that for the rollout of the new iteration of the engine, any studio that uses it, the first $1 million of revenue from a game is royalty free to Unreal also.
Oh wow.
It's definitely a play. It's definitely a play for that crowd.
I was like, for indies, that's also particularly lucrative, I would think.
I mean, of course it's a play. For them, that's still just a business. But the one thing that I wanted to ask...
I'm not complaining. As someone who would probably financially massively benefit from that if we did make an Unreal game, I'm definitely not complaining. But
this is not technically... I feel like it's being spoken about like it's next-gen tech. I feel like that... especially considering how iterative consoles have become and how much I feel like the landscape is going to change with, the Pro and the X coming sort of mid-cycle for this generation of consoles. I feel like we're going to keep seeing more of that. But I wanted to say, like, this tech demo isn't technically next-gen tech. It is literally just a change to an engine. Is there any reason why this... Like a game could not be made for PlayStation 4 or for Xbox One X
using this
on this engine?
But wasn't the video specifically saying this is our engine running on PS5?
It was. That's how they marketed it. But I don't feel like it couldn't necessarily function.
Maybe the engine's using the architecture of it is inherent to the architecture of the new system.
So there's a few reasons. Yeah, there is some technical stuff that's been with the new platforms, and this is where I'm going to dance around some NDAs. But basically, the architecture of the new hardware. I think most of this is out there, and whatever isn't, I'll get in trouble for. That's fine. Like the way the architecture's set up, the way these future graphics cards are working. Yes, you could build a PC that will run this, and of course you will be able to, because you best believe Fortnite's going to make use of all this technology, right? So they're going to want it on all platforms. But in terms of the ray tracing in particular, there's a lot of stuff that's happened with graphics cards recently that's kind of empowering ray tracing in a way that wasn't possible before. It's so good. And that's a big part of the Unreal demo, is them claiming that ray tracing is kind of an intrinsic thing. Not having to bake light maps. Every environment you've ever walked into in a video game, with very few exceptions, the creators of that level had to leave a computer running for about an hour to render all the shadows on the walls. That's gone.
Yeah, you got to place the sun, man. That's when I saw it for Detroit Become Human. They basically just like pulled the engine apart and showed me exactly where all the light sources were, and were like, you don't understand how expensive lighting is, and we can't have this light be too bright because then it screws up the whole scene. And it was just this like minefield of putting light in video games is really hard.
This stuff changes everything, because ray tracing in theory means infinite numbers of light. Technically, there's no such thing as infinite, obviously, but like it becomes easier. So no, there's there you go, the doors of perception. So it is trippy. But
I got to bring it back to Mike Bithell.
The other big thing, Alanah, is like the platform baseline. When you're making games, you're not necessarily, unless you're Crytek, you're not making games for like the best ever computer. Mm-hmm. You're making games for where people will actually buy your game. Mm-hmm. So having a generational jump means that up till now, if I want to put ray tracing into a game, I'm making a decision to basically make a feature for 5%, 10% of the audience. With Control, if you're going to build a marketing campaign around that, it's worth putting that in. For me, it makes no sense. Whereas now with PS5 and Xbox, I'm going to be able to just assume I can have that, so therefore I can do it. And the other one is SSD, which is massive and no one's paying enough attention to, which is the fast loading, which is completely redefining. It's going to redefine how we play games in terms of the open world and fast travel. Like fast travel doesn't matter anymore in terms of like. I mean, even structures though, like Final Fantasy VII Remake, I feel like it masks a lot of loading by giving you like things that are very obvious to me that I feel like, you know, a lot of people are just like, why did that take so long? Like something like opening a door can be a button press that takes a really long time, more than it should. Or you have to walk slowly down a hallway when you can run everywhere else. Inching through a gap in a wall to hide a loading screen and all that stuff. It's the Gears of War taking a phone call and having to walk really slowly thing that it's even in Final Fantasy VII, which I feel like that game is beautiful and is pretty big and is very, very detailed when you get into the sandboxy areas. It's not particularly open world, but the loading there is so obvious that I found it a little bit jarring. And that's done. Like, to be clear, like there'll be probably some transition games in the overlap when we first play the first few games that do it, but generally in the next era, we're not going to have loading times anymore. And that's going to redefine the shape of how we play games and how games even work, because right now, you know, there's lots of systems and ways that games are made in order to like hide loading, as you say, and kind of to build that cadence. Space elevator. That Spider-Man demo is crazy. Like, and that's going to be the default. Sorry.
Jumping in very quickly.
I'm sorry. I'm just excited, man. I'm just excited about the tech.
I am too.
Yeah.
I have to jump off, but like last week, and you guys, you three people, this whole After Dark thing, I did listen to it.
Oh, you watch? You are a fan. That's great. That's great.
Cretins. So I sure.
Well, are you going to tune into After Dark next week as well?
Personally, I think it's a great spinoff show, and I look forward to it. So I'll let you guys get to create that content. Thank you for always hosting this, Alanah. You're incredible. Yay, video games! Making games is hard. I'll see you guys next week. Is that what we're doing?
Was that an Alan Watts quote?
That was an Alan Watts quote, as a matter of fact.
We'll probably wrap the show up pretty soon, but yeah, we'll see you next week, Troy. Thank you.
Bye, guys.
See you later, Troy.
Bye. Austin, how much longer do
you have? Finally, he's gone. Jeez.
Yeah. As we're slowly inching towards our spin-off show, a little more without Troy each time.
Yeah.
I'm good for a few minutes. I can see us through to the end. I suspect.
We've almost done an hour anyway, so it's not a big deal. But yeah. I mean, I wanted to talk about some of the expectations for next gen, and that, like, you know, kind of up until this Unreal demo came out, I was of the mindset, and a lot of the community had been saying it too, that the graphical updates, especially from the Xbox conference, I don't know if you guys saw that, didn't seem to be as significant as we have been used to in previous console cycles, which is, it's going to slow down anyway at this point because games have gotten so attractive. You know, we're not playing in different amounts of bits at this point. It's such a different landscape to what it was even a decade ago, really. But no, because things
16 colors.
Right. Because things are more iterative, and I'm still expecting there to be, you know, probably 4 versions of an Xbox in the next console cycle. And in theory, maybe they'll eventually let us just upgrade a graphics card. I don't know if that's part of the plan, but I feel like one thing that a lot of people don't consider when it comes to how games look is that consoles are in theory kind of holding everything back, but at the same time, so are people with just base level PCs, right? So in theory right now we could be getting games that run a lot better than they currently do, but they're going to make games for the consoles because that's what most people have, despite what I feel like the PC audience tries to say. Most people are still playing on console, technically even more on mobile, but that's a separate thing. And then,
actually, I was gonna chime that in. Just say, like, when you say consoles are holding things back, it's interesting because there's vastly more mobile gamers than like any other category.
Almost like, I've gone blurry. It's almost a completely different landscape. Like, I almost consider mobile gaming to be totally separate to the other two. Even
but they're converging because, you know, it's like if you look at, again, just sort of, hopefully this doesn't come across as a plug, but Pathless is obviously coming out as a PlayStation title. That was already announced as a PS4 game when they first announced it, but it's also announced as part of Apple Arcade. And so like they had to be able to figure out how in the hell can we make this thing take advantage of the current gen technology, but current gen on Apple devices and current gen Sony devices. Is that a possible target to hit? And I do believe it is. I mean, you have to make very calculated decisions. So yeah, anyway, it's a strange thing because they're like two different industries, but they are, it seems to me that Apple's working very hard to try to converge them as best they can.
For sure. Yeah, touchscreen controls have always sucked for me, but like Papers, Please is probably one of my favorite games ever. And that's a game that I think I've only ever played on an iOS device. But yeah, my point was I feel like I've seen a lot of the community say that they're disappointed that we've not had as many graphical updates as they expect, or they're not blown away by everything we've seen of next gen yet. And I kind of just wanted to say that I feel like, yeah, things are slowing down and things are getting more iterative. But it's also, until you get a major change to an engine like this Unreal update, not that photogrammetry wasn't already a thing. Like I know EA relied on that really heavily with Battlefront specifically. Is like a huge part of like making sure that everything Star Wars looks very realistic. Hey, I mentioned Star Wars. Looks very realistic in that game and is like the correct scale. It's something that we can really only do so much. Like in theory, if you want to make a 10-minute demo, you can make that look absolutely incredible. But the minute that you want to make a larger game, you got to take stuff out to put other stuff in. It's just not as simple as I feel like a lot of the community thinks it is. And that's probably why, if you're not blown away by what you've seen of next gen footage so far, it's because you kind of can't be at this point. And
also I think we've been trained. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say we've been trained to kind of look at I feel like the industry always does this with every next generation, where we've trained the audience to basically like downgrade in their head from what we show them at E3. We show them something and we've kind of taught them to be a little bit skeptical and go, okay, well, obviously when this hits full production, like as you said, the vertical slice is not going to be indicative. It's going to come down a bit. And with this, I think it will come down less. And the other thing, of course, is the first games of a console generation are the ugliest by a long way. And,
by the time you
what
get
we're
to
seeing
the
right
end,
now,
right
now you're
and
seeing
I would assume that's true of
you're
a new
seeing,
engine too, right?
You're seeing Perfect Dark Zero. These are not the games that are going to define the aesthetic of this.
Rise is really pretty though.
Say again?
That game's still Rise. It was Crytek Xbox exclusive launch title. That game's still, I think,
really?
unless I'm misremembering it, still really pretty. But yeah, that was basically what I'm trying to say is the stuff takes time, and seeing the disappointment, I think, largely comes from people psychologically ruling out the fact that the Pro and the Xbox One X have existed in this life cycle, which has changed things a bit, but also that our expectations have changed because the way things are being iterated on graphically is, in theory, a little bit slower, or it feels like it's slower.
When you say the that disparity between the small little vertical slice demo and scaling up to production, and also kind of connected with the early phase of release of a new console, would you say that that's also true, like Mike, on a technical level, like the initial users of a new engine or a major update to an engine, isn't that going to have also the same symptoms basically? Because we collectively, like developers, I overextend myself by saying we, but people like you are still learning all the minutia of what makes it really, really sing.
Sure.
And that it would, same with Unreal, no different than the hardware of a PS5 or whatever, right? That's not a far stretch to say.
And also games take time to make, right? Like anything you've seen in an Unreal 5 demo, that was news to, the vast majority of developers. Obviously, there will be people who've had early access to that, but it's still going to be probably a year or two before you actually, that's probably, I would guess, as is normally the case, that most of the launch titles will be on Unreal 4, I would assume. Yeah. And likewise, like franchise stuff, sometimes those jumps are really scary. And I think Batman's the one that's a great example of like the Batman, the Arkham games were in Unreal 3 way past the point where Unreal 4 came out. Like, I feel like they did dev cycles after that because it's what they built in up to that point. And again, risk management, right? That's something we've talked about.
And they made it work.
And they made it work. And you can always get more out of an engine. You know, there's always a few more tricks you can find, a few more gimmicks you can kind of work out to kind of make it sing. And and that's demonstrated by the kind of the underwhelming thing is like, to the average player, that Unreal 5 demo probably looks about as good as the photogrammetry stuff in Battlefield, right? Like you're seeing that and you maybe aren't being blown away by it. So yeah, we'll be playing Unreal 4 games for quite some time, I would have thought.
I just feel like this particular console cycle is an interesting one, but it's also obviously hurt by the fact that we're not having any in-person stuff. Like, I think I mentioned to you guys, I've done a couple of previews remotely and they're really bad because it's over Discord and the game looks bad and there's lag. It's just such a terrible way to cover games. And right now, what is there? There's Keighley has Summer Game Fest, I think it's called, and then IGN has Summer of Games. And I always want to be like, when you people are naming these things, are you aware that there is a different hemisphere? It's winter in Australia. Do they just not get to partake? The whole southern hemisphere is just like, summer, I gotta wait till December.
Here's actually
getting
honest question for you about that though, because I've thought about that actually randomly here and there. Something like this will make me wonder that. But here's a question for you, because like the population of Australia is like the same as Southern California, like
it's pretty similar.
Yeah, exactly. Like it's the percentage of people for whom summer is relevant. Like if you look at essentially the entire northern hemisphere, that's where the overwhelming entire human population lives, not just America, obviously. So my question is that something that you, whether it's right or not, or whether that's sort of egocentric on us northern hemispherites, the question is, this is just random trivia, but do you find you have kind of before you ever moved here, was that an auto adjustment that you kind of got indoctrinated to make because everything was relative to, games media in the Bay Area or in LA or
so like
London?
Even in Australia, do you remember Summer of Arcade? It was basically
maybe
an Xbox Live, a digital event, I guess. It's like Bastion came out of.
Yeah.
A lot of games came out of Summer of Arcade. In Australia, it was called Winter of Arcade. So they did localize it because, it's sure the population is lesser, but it's still millions of people. So the only thing that my brain knows is White Christmas. And that's because I've seen so many films that have a White Christmas. So that's the only reason that I really just automatically know that it's winter at that time of year in this hemisphere, is because of all the movies I've seen. Because there are still a lot of Americans I meet who I've been told I was lying when I told someone that it was the opposite season in Australia. They're like, I don't believe you. How does that work? And I was like, hemispheres? This is how it happens. And they're just like, and that sounds like bullshit. So
axial tilt. You don't hear a lot of axial tilters in the same camp as flat earthers.
It's true, not quite as many, but it's definitely
seasons are a lie.
Yeah, but no, this stuff it is, to get back to Summer Game Fest and Summer of Games or whatever they're calling them. Sorry to everyone in the Southern Hemisphere. Shout out to you going in the winter out there. It's a tough time. It snows in Australia. Fun fact. A lot of people don't know that. But yeah, I feel like it's a really interesting time as well because, again, people aren't seeing things in person. So you can't read the journalists or the YouTubers or whatever tell you how good things actually look. We have to see everything streamed. So that is absolutely worth noting as well. When things are streamed, a lot of streams are only in 1080 and a lot of your monitors are only in 1080 anyway. So a lot of the time it's really difficult for you to actually get a hold of what something looks like until you see it in person. In 2020, we just don't really have the option to do this stuff any other way. I just feel like a lot of people have ruled out next gen, and I'm like, no. I feel like you're getting ahead of yourself here. What we're seeing right now is not what we're going to see over time. What you're seeing right now is based on expectations that you have from previous generations where, now things graphically are going to shift less dramatically, but it'll still be happening. And it's to, like what Mike said, some of the updates that we'll see that people aren't talking about as much is getting rid of loading screens rather than just... But Forza Motorsport 7 already looks perfect. Like, sure, it's gonna be smaller as things go forward, but we'll get.
Also, it is a historical thing that we've always said. I remember when Half-Life 2 came out, and as an industry, we said, right, that's as good as games have to
peaked.
Look now.
We've
peaked.
Weird.
It's done. And you know what? We'll be looking back at this stuff now. And we thought Final Fantasy VII Remake was like the pinnacle. It's just going to continue.
So weird how that works. That I had that with 64 games. I was like, this is perfect. And then I play Rare Replay, and you see them there, and you're like, oh yeah, this is how it looks. And I went back and played them on 64. And was like, this looks garbage, because your brain remembers things looking better than they actually do as well.
Oh yeah, of course.
Everything looks the way the remastered version looks in my mind.
It's the good old days.
And we didn't get smarter. That's still the same. Like, we're still gonna look back on this stuff the same way and make the same mistakes.
On this conversation and hear what we said about Final Fantasy VII. That's what's up.
You know what a really aggressive one of those for me was System Shock 2, where I remember that game being so like visceral and realistic, and in going back and replaying it like a decade later, I was shocked at how it just had not aged. Even the movement felt so clunky, and the very weird sort of slow-mo of the NPCs and the enemies and whatever. And it was funny how like your brain mythologizes things about 5 seconds after the experience is over.
True.
And then just continues to build on the mythological, hologram of the thing instead of the real thing. And it's like you're in a game of telephone with your own memory from the instant the event has passed. And yeah, it's one of those. As a side note, that's why when the fact that eyewitness testimony carries so much weight in the criminal justice system is fucking bonkers for that reason. It is the most demonstrably fallible source of evidence that you could possibly come up with.
And they don't count the sniffer dogs as real evidence. He tracked where the man walked with his nose. Yeah, dogs don't hold up in court. It's like, what? But he did such a good job. And you trust our eyes? Are you joking?
Not to mention that they trust like dogs for people like with severe allergies and things like that, where it could kill them to, like I remember watching a TV special about that where there was a girl, like a very young kid, like 5-6 years old, who had such a severe peanut allergy that even just ambiently in the air, like if she smelled peanut butter, like from a bakery, that alone could give her that anaphylactic reaction. So she had a dog that if she was out in public, the dog would walk like 10-15 feet ahead of her. And if it sat randomly, she knew to go the other way.
Wow.
And it's like,
dogs.
If you're willing to entrust that level of life-savingness, you'd think that you would trust the fidelity of a crime. It's certainly better than a human fucking eyewitness testimony, especially when someone was hysterical and afraid and already kind of not operating normally.
The dogs were robbed. But one of my favorite things about VR, I don't know if I've mentioned this on the podcast before, is that the way that you remember VR is different to the way that you remember most other video games, because your brain is still having this basically cognitive battle of thinking that VR is real. So they've done a bunch of studies about this where you will remember VR like it is an actual memory you had rather than experience you had of playing something. So you can generally remember a VR experience really, really vividly. You can see that image as though it is an image you saw with your own eyes, because I guess it was if you can't see anything else. So it means that you can remember environments better, you can navigate better, and you can generally, like, without having to look at a map, know exactly where to go in VR, or, not play a game for a month and pick it up and still recognize where to go. Much better than you would be able to in a game that you're playing on a monitor, which I think is just so cool, because the whole point of VR is that technology has gotten beyond us, in that what we are doing is consciously tricking ourselves into thinking something is real, knowing our brain, even though we consciously know it's not real, is too stupid to keep up. That's why you get sick. Your brain's like, I should be moving. I should definitely be walking right now. Why am I not walking? And I get really bad VR motion sickness, which is a
And your
huge
brain's
problem,
like,
but...
must be poison. Must be poison. Get it out the system.
I've been drugged. I need to get rid of this immediately. I just think it's so dope that, like, we're literally beyond our own conscious comprehension of what that technology is. It's so cool. And I mean, that's the real next gen.
It's true.
Next gen was in us all along.
It
was.
VR is
I got to give play a test of what became the Lone Echo of Ready at Dawn, They were doing VR prototyping for it years ago, and it was all 0G, floating through a space station where you have the gloves and you're kind of pushing off of surfaces and floating, however. And I remember they said, all I did is just put it on me and push here. Can you look down, push off, and then look up and see yourself drifting towards the ceiling? And I remember being because I had always been so skeptical. I was like, it's never going to work. It's just too much between peripherals and setting up the cameras and the cables. And I just thought, this is never going to become anything mainstream. I hope I'm wrong, because it blew me away. Because what happened was,
I'm using VR every day right now, every single day.
I mean, it's obviously the Quest was a big game changer.
Yeah, it is
for
Quest.
sure.
Yeah.
But I remember the thing was, I was talking to the guy who was kind of my handler for this demo, and he said, see that sort of porthole in the wall? I'm on the opposite wall. He said, can you push off and aim for it and then just drift through it? And this whole time I'd been in kind of like some sort of 0G chamber, and there was no sense of context, and it was just a tech demo, so there's no like story or setup or anything. And I remember I pushed and I successfully managed to hit this little hole, and I drifted out, and then I was like fucking in space over Saturn. And my whole face just instantly started sweating.
Yeah.
And like my palms, but I was exhilarated. But it was like, because I remember it gave me goosebumps. I just said, this is the most transcendent gaming experience I've probably ever had in my life. It instantly made me a VR convert.
It's incredible.
But it was amazing to me how my body was 100% convinced it was real for about a second. And I just was like, I take off the thing and my hair is soaked, and I'm like, holy shit. I mean, it looked like I was just getting out of a pool and taking off scuba gear.
I reviewed
it was
Minecraft
insane.
in VR for IGN and had to take breaks every probably 15 minutes because that game especially, very scary in VR. I don't generally find Minecraft scary, but when you see the size of those spiders and they look like they're actually in front of you, terrifying. Like seeing a creeper in VR and being like, oh my god, it's huge. It's like awful. But yeah, my body with that one really just rejected Minecraft hard, so I was having to take it off and like take a breather and have some water and then put it back on. The first game in VR I ever played was Team Fortress 2, and every time there's an explosion, your body just flies, and it's awful. But again, very cool testament to what we're doing to our brains. I just think it's so dope. Closing fun fact, because I love talking about this, I've actually done 0G. I've done a 0G flight.
Really?
Like the vomit comet?
Yes, I've done a vomit comet, as they call it. Nobody vomited. And it is just so difficult to move because your velocity's all off, right? So like you could try to stay still, but the minute you touch a wall, you're just going to slingshot in the other direction. So even trying to just stay in one position when you're doing that is so hard to do. I just feel like we don't give the astronauts enough credit, you know?
Were you like reviewing 0G for IGN?
It
Is that what this was?
I
Like,
wish.
I give 0G as an experience a 9 out of 10.
It was a
7 out of 10.
particular producer at IGN on what's basically like the production sales team. He pitched a series that was basically doing extreme things while playing video games, which was definitely just so this particular dude had an excuse to do all these cool extreme things on IGN's budget. Successful pitch. It went through. Somebody sponsored it. But mine was to play 1-2 switch in 0G.
That's amazing.
So we're trying to play 1-2 switch, 0G inside of a plane it's removed. And
Do the
even
gyros even work in that?
That was our first concern was, is the gyro even going to work? Gyro
Yeah.
does still work
Really?
for the
That's
most part.
interesting.
There were like some issues, but I mean, the biggest
Yeah.
problem we had was like, it's me and Naomi Kyle holding Joy-Con, and then we would leave the actual like switch screen to float, but then if anything touches it, it's gone. So you just can't see where it's gone, and it's so hard to get anything back. It's so hard to move. It's crazy, but also one of the coolest things I've ever done.
That's
No
so
vomiting
cool.
involved.
It's one of
Very
my
cool.
biggest
Highly
regrets
recommend
is I was invited onto one of those once and I didn't do it.
you totally should.
I should have done.
Were you unable, or did you turn it down?
Yeah, it was just the timings didn't work out, but like, yeah, that would have been cool.
I think it
I'll
is
do it
about
next time I get invited.
$12,000 a person or something absurd.
It was around that kind of thing. Yeah, I think.
Yeah, it's a lot of money, but yeah, very, very cool stuff if you ever get to do it. And hopefully one day they do just pair VR into that properly. That's the future.
Can you imagine though if you're going for one of the most unique, amazing experiences? You're like, I want to do this one in VR. Like, I don't want to actually see
Well,
anything.
they did say I was next to the one window in the plane, and they were like, we recommend that you don't look out of the window. So naturally, I'm like, I'm going to look out that fucking window. And I did. And when you're nosediving, I would prefer to look at anything else. Like,
That's got to be
looking out the
terrifying,
window,
right?
the plane is literally nosediving, and then you see the horizon, and it's like that. And you're like, oh, that's not good, because when you're not thinking about it, it's fine. Yeah.
7 out of 10.
That video. Top 10 IGN employee deaths. 0G. All right.
Wouldn't even be number 1. That's the thing. It's like number 3.
I have the scar on my hand. Probably can't see it, like right here, because one of the first features I ever wrote for them, they made me cut open an amiibo with a hacksaw. A lot harder than you would think. They're very solid. We were like, we just want to see what's inside it. So I opened it up, and it was a Kirby. And very, very big scar. I bled for that company, man. And then the comments were like, this is stupid. Why did you do this? Like, I don't know. It's what they made me. I don't know. Very alongside my ranking the amiibo in terms of attractiveness article. Did a lot of very important stuff there. But before we wrap this up, anyone have any closing thoughts they wanted to share on VR?
I have some
My big
clothing
one was
thoughts.
obviously... My big one was obviously hold your horses. We're all acting like next gen is shit and ugly, and I think we're off base.
Yeah. It was ever
anyone else?
No, I'm excited. I'm excited. Both like in the Unreal demo where they're, Unreal also famously always had somewhat lackluster built-in audio, sort of the default audio capabilities of it were always easily outdone by middleware, things like WIs and Fmod, and they are seemingly promising far greater integration of cool tricks, and similarly, like the PS5 announcements included a breakdown of audio, and their whole kind of their home version of something like ambisonic, 3D audio, where it's trying to be like they were promising or they were pitching, I guess. I don't know how real it would be, but on the PS5, things like if you're in their specific thing they mentioned was if you're in a rainstorm and traditionally in games you just have like a wave file that somebody has of Foley, someone goes out into the rain and they literally just record the rain, and there's like a stereo file or maybe a surround file of rain, and they said, next gen tech will be able to essentially sample individual rain drops and have like a million individual rain events happening, which should be exponentially more immersive, and the hardware can handle. Because the first thing you think is that's all well and good. It's the same problem that you mentioned before, where a tech demo where they decide to have a million individual raindrops sounds really cool, but could you possibly scale that to a game of even modest size? And they seem to think so. That, obviously that's primarily for sound designers to get all excited about, but there's always ways that music can potentially benefit from that level of work as well. So it's exciting. We'll see. I look forward to trying to break it.
I'm just doing the thing where I Google something to find out if it's been announced yet. Bear with me.
Let me tell you, working at IGN, I have it less now because I'm doing a lot less news-focused things, but I'd often be like, shit, is that Andy Aid? Or am I allowed, do people know this? Am I allowed to say that?
All I'm saying, Austin, is you're going to love what they're doing with the controller on PS5 as well, with the DualSense stuff.
There you go.
Haptic. Yeah, the raindrops thing. I've had some demos. They're very good. That's gonna be some Austin. You're gonna have some fun in games with that, I think.
Yeah, that sounds to me like, I think mostly under NDA.
Mostly under NDA, probably. I think I've said as much. I just checked their press release. I'm fine.
All of a sudden, it's saying my internet connection is unstable, so that seems like a good time.
They're coming for us.
They heard. Oh no! Good time to wrap up the show.
Coming after you on your Yavin 4 base.
That's right.
Very nice. That's a
She
Star
rebels.
War.
She rebels. That wasn't in the movie, was it? That line. No.
They cut it.
This is a rebellion, isn't it? I rebel.
They also cut the signature shot from the trailer where the TIE fighter comes up and is staring at her on the platform. And I remember thinking, that's a cool shot.
But Disney make a lot of stuff with their trailers that's not in their films often, so that they aren't spoiled, and I like that. I think
they also did a lot of reshoots, right, on that one.
Probably. Oh, on Rogue One for sure they did, yeah. I don't think I mentioned it while we were recording, but everyone, the Clone Wars TV show is very good, and that last season is absolutely incredible, and the last 3 episodes made me cry. So go watch that also. And that's it for this week, everyone. We'll see you guys next week. Thanks for joining us.
Cheers.
Hooray.
Bye.